Hello, hello, hello. I'm HoJo.
And I'm Hunnsy.
And welcome to this, the groundbreaking 12th episode of HoJo and Hunnsy's Hard Rock House, the safe space for old rock gumbies just like us, where metal up your ass is something worrying that you want to see a doctor about rather than a retro Metallica t-shirt that you've just found at the bottom of your sock drawer. Isn't that right?
That is very right, HoJo. And
what was the last problem you had to go and see a doctor about that you can talk about?
Can't really
go into that.
Can't really go into that, no. But it didn't involve metal up my ass, that's for sure.
No, well, that's something.
There might have been a camera up my ass, but not metal.
I had a lump taken off my back last week, which seems to be standard practice for people of our age, doesn't it?
Everything's all right, I assume.
Everything's all right, yeah, we're all happy. But this is the way it goes when you become old giffers like us. There's always something either falling off or growing where it shouldn't.
Apart from hair.
Apart from hair, yes, of which we used to have a considerable amount, and now we have considerably less.
Yes, but it still grows in places that you don't want it to grow.
Yeah, exactly. That's a cruel trick, isn't it?
It is cruel. That and dogs can die from eating chocolate, but that's a separate story.
That is a separate story. We don't want to start off on a downer, do we? So, Hunnsy, let's cut to the chase. What is it that's been burning your ears this week?
Well, I've been listening to an album by a band from Washington, D.C. in the United States.
The Swamp, as certain people might call
it. Swamp. Yeah, certain people might call it that. And I've been listening to I think it was their fifth album. I've been listening to Sinful by the band Angel that came out in 1979. You know, you mentioned on a previous episode about Cheap Trick Heaven Tonight being your go-to record.
Right, when I'm in a pop rocking mood, yeah.
Yeah, when you're in a pop rocking mood, Heaven Tonight was your go-to album. Well, yeah. Angel's Sinful is probably mine because I think there's some songs on it that could have been taken from Cheap Trick's repertoire. Rick Nielsen goes, shit, I wished I'd written that. A brilliant album from start to finish, I think.
It is a really great album. It's actually one of the very first albums that I bought when I was starting to go outside what you might call the mainstream of rock. So you know how it was for us in England growing up. You'd start off with Kiss, and then you'd hear a bit of REO Speedwagon, and then you might go, oh yeah, well, Journey, they've got like that song Any Way You Want It, which was hovering around the dusty end of the charts. But Angel was one of the very first ones where I went, actually, I don't know anything about this band. And I'll bet you got into them for the same reason that I did.
Mine was always the hair.
Okay, so where did you first see the hair? Don't say on top of their heads, because that's obvious.
My old mate Ginger, who I previously mentioned in a podcast, introduced me to them. I think it was round his house after a long night at a nightclub somewhere. He took me back to his house and he showed me it and went, you've got to listen to this. It's just epic. And it was the Sinful album. And obviously from then on, I went and discovered the albums that came before that. But yeah, it was the hair. I was fascinated by Punky Meadows' hair. And I always wanted Punky Meadows' hair.
I think we've all gone through an I want Punky's hair phase, haven't we?
It was phenomenal. But that album, going back to the album, right? Going back to what
no. Let's talk about hair. Come on.
All right, okay.
I don't care about the music.
All right, okay. But they all had great hair, didn't they?
Punky was your favourite?
Oh, by a long chalk. Greg Giuffria. Yeah,
put your teeth back in, Hunnsy. Yeah,
Giuffria.
Greg.
He had great hair as well. But I just loved that sleeve, the whole sort of white thing. And I'm going to try and remember the word. Their logo, I think, is it ambigrammatic?
You might very well be right, but obviously you swallowed a dictionary and I'll say you can look at it both ways and it reads the same.
Yeah, but I think the word is ambigrammatic.
I think it is. But you're cleverer than me, mate.
I'm not. I just looked it up before the podcast.
You've done some research.
I've done some research.
Good Lord.
No, but I love the logo as well. So, like, for me, that Angel logo sits alongside the Stars logo as two of the best 70s rock band logos.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That Angel logo was so incredibly clever, wasn't it? That you literally could read it both ways. It was amazing.
Just brilliant. And obviously they were all in white, and it's a reference to the name of the band. But if I'm right, wasn't their whole dressing in white thing deliberate as a contrast to Kiss? I think it was because they were discovered by Gene Simmons, weren't they?
I believe they were discovered by Gene Simmons. And of course, they ended up being signed to Casablanca, which was Kiss's label. And yes, I think the idea was that they were supposed to be the antidote to Kiss's demonic, blood-spewing, fire-breathing vibes. And Angel was supposed to be a little bit holier and heavenly. Here's me just putting it out there. I would rate Sinful as a better album than Kiss's Dynasty. How do you respond to that?
I agree. That's going to cause upset, particularly amongst some really good friends of mine who absolutely adore Kiss. But for me, it is.
I was a big fan of Kiss when I was a kid. Up until 1980, I was a huge Kiss fan. and then it all went a bit south for me. I love Dynasty, but I have to say, with the passage of time, I think Sinful has been more of a stayer, hasn't it? I mean, in the Grand National of glam rock albums.
Going back to my point around the Cheap Trick sounding vibe, Wild and Hot, that is literally a Cheap Trick song.
Well, it literally isn't. But
no, but what's French for facetious?
Facetious.
There you go. LA Lady, Greg, I'm just going to call him Greg. Greg's honky-tonk piano on that track is just amazing.
Did you ever put your foot up on your sofa like you were playing a piano with your foot like that? Like a Jerry Lee Lewis kind of vibe? Because when I hear that song, that's what it makes me feel like doing.
Yeah, air piano.
Air piano, yeah, air and leg piano. So,
air and leg piano, yeah. But
don't try that at home, kids. It's for advanced rockers only.
I implore anybody who doesn't know this record to go and listen to it, because if you love your pop rock, bit glammy, just full of tunes, full of melodies, full of rock, it's just brilliant. And I think their live album, despite the ridiculous overdubs of the crowd, which I think everybody was kind of doing at the time, their live album, Live Without a Net, is also a fantastic, it's a double. Their live album, Live Without a Net, is something to behold as well.
Just a quick one before we move on from Angel. Again, I'm disappointed I'm agreeing with you. I think that's a classic pop rock album. A word on Frank DiMino and his helium pitch vocals?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. It suits the music. It suits the music. He's a great singer, isn't he, Frank?
I remember reading a story written by Sylvie Simmons, who was Sounds newspaper's LA rock correspondent in the 70s. And she went to interview them around the time of Sinful. And she said that he spoke like he was in the Mafia. He had some kind of, like a whispering voice, like, like that there. And you go, if he talks like that, how does he sing like he's just inhaled an enormous helium balloon?
Well, I never knew that. That's brilliant. Wasn't Rudy Sarzo in Angel for a while?
Yeah, for about 5 minutes. He never played on a record or anything, so yeah. I don't know. I don't even know if he got the get-up or if they'd already abandoned it by then.
Well, interesting band, though, because they had lots of members who came in who went on to either do other things or were in other things. Felix Robinson was on White Lion's album, I believe, and Greg went on to do his own House of Lords stuff, which was pretty good, but a bit too wimpy for me.
Angel is the thing, isn't it? It was all downhill after that. I did go and interview Greg Giuffria once on his boat. I can't remember if we've mentioned this on the podcast.
You've got to mention it now.
I can't. I'll go to prison.
Because you went, no, hang on, you went fishing, didn't you?
Oh, that's right, yeah. I went fishing with my nose. Anyway, let's draw a discreet veil over Angel. So, really, I should be talking about what I've been listening to.
You should be, yes.
Nothing to do with Angel, I'm afraid, Hunnsy.
I've
been listening to the first album from a band called Masters of Reality. Now, you all know Masters of Reality, won't you?
Oh, yeah, Masters of Reality. I must admit, I never really got into them. It's just one of those bands that I listened to it, heard it, thought they were good, but then it just passed me by a little bit. Something else came along that I was more interested in.
I think you wouldn't probably like it because it's a bit of art in there, Rock. I'm not trying to do you down, Hunnsy, but I don't see you as the art rock guru.
Thanks very much.
Do you think you are? You like skull-pounding heavy metal music or tremendous pop rock?
Yeah, I like cover art of rock bands.
But not arty rock.
I'm not really into arty rock.
Yeah, and I think Masters of Reality, I'm probably fair in saying they come under that banner, don't they?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
A little bit arty. There was quite a lot of 60s influence in there. Quite a lot of pseudo blues, like bands like Cream. Third generation blues, I suppose.
Bit of stoner. There was a bit of stoner rock
and well, there's very stoner rock in there. And of course, there's a reason for that, isn't it? Because the main man in Masters of Reality is Chris Goss. And I presume you know that he is known as the godfather of stoner. Did you know that?
I never knew that. Is that a title he gave himself?
No, I think it's been awarded to him by various Gumbies over the years. And I'm not even sure that he particularly responds to it. I'd like to interview him and say, how would you respond if I said you're the guru of stoner? But he produced the first Caius, no, not the first Caius album, the first Caius album that I heard, which is Blues from the Red Sun. Do you know that record?
Yeah, I know that record very well. Yeah.
And that is an absolute banger. We'll have to talk about that one day.
Yeah. I'm assuming the likes of Josh Homme and Nick Oliveri, they're bigger fans of Masters of Reality.
Yeah, I can only assume that they are because I guess that's how Chris Goss got his in there because I know he's very tight with all those stoner geezers. The funny thing is that the first Masters of Reality album, called Masters of Reality, of course, somewhere there's a Black Sabbath influence going down, isn't there? But it's not really what you call stoner rock. It's quite eclectic. It's quite weird. There's little flecks of the Doors in there, but the riffing is quite heavy. And Chris's voice is very melodic, but nothing like a Frank DiMino type melodic voice. He's never going to get the call to go in and do his stuff with Journey.
So you remember on a previous episode where I said I'd like to hear Paul Rodgers singing Freewheel Burning, or Rob Halford singing Love Removal Machine. Do you think we should see if we can get Chris Goss to see if he would sing an Angel song, or maybe Frank DiMino singing a Master of Reality song?
Well, it would be brilliant. If Frank DiMino had to sing a Master of Reality song, obviously I'd have to choose the track Getting High. So it would be like Getting High, like he gets high with his helium balloons.
Right, okay.
He'll never be allowed to play in the Premiership for football, will he?
Why?
Well, it's all banned, that, isn't it? All that helium balloon stuff. What do they call it these days? They're all getting done for it at the moment, aren't they?
Well, never mind. We're not here to talk about football, so carry on.
Oh, go on. You liked it when Michael Coons wanted to talk about meeting Pele. You liked that.
Oh, he did. And George Best. That was brilliant.
So you didn't mind talking about football then, did you?
No, but not here. No. Tell our listeners why they should go and listen to this album.
Okay, well, as I've said, I've explained what the music sounds like. It's quite varied. The riffing was surprisingly heavier than I remembered it, because I listened to it all the way through today before we started recording. Song called The Candy Song. That's a real groove rocker. John Brown is probably my favourite track on the album. That's definitely worth looking into. You'll be excited to see there's a track called Kill the King.
Is that a cover of the Rainbow?
Yeah, you're going to be less excited now when I say it isn't.
It isn't. Oh, well, never mind.
No, never mind. That would have really made your day, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You're now the king of the metal mashup, aren't you? You're always thinking about who might do this and who might do that.
Who produced this record, by the way?
It was Rick Rubin.
So
Rick Rubin was the man who discovered them. Rick Rubin was the man who signed them. But it didn't seem to last long, the relationship with Deaf American, because by the time their second album came out, which is called, I believe, Sunrise on the Suffer Bus,
right, okay,
in 1992. The first album was out in 1989.
So we're in the grunge wars territories.
Yeah. In some ways, though, you do wonder whether a band like Masters of Reality and the cohort that Chris Goss used to knock around with might have survived it better because they were part of that stoner scene. Here's my little theory, that stoner is the missing link between metal and grunge.
Oh, that's a big step.
Because you know what I mean? If you take a classic metal band like Sabbath, and then you think about Caius, like we were talking earlier. There's definite connection there, isn't there? But Caius also fits with an Alice in Chains kind of vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah, Screaming Trees and all that sort of stuff.
So that's my theory. I'd be very interested to see what the Single Digit listeners think about that concept, that stoner is the missing link between grunge and metal. So that's what I've been listening to, Hunnsy. Hope you go and take a listen to it. You probably won't like it, but hey, what the fuck? I'm the one with the taste on this podcast, don't you know it?
That's not what I see on our Facebook page. Believe you me. Believe you me. I like it because it's a curveball. I wasn't expecting it. And I will go back and listen to it, and I'll come back to you and let you know what I think.
Okay, good man. That's good.
HoJo, before we move on to the next section of the pod, I've got a Dwarf update.
Oh, you're referring to our last episode when we talked about Ozzy'S Dwarf from back in the day and how I'd met him in the HMV when he was hanging around with Ozzy at a signing.
I've done my real-time research, and the aforementioned dwarf that you met in Birmingham, he was called John Edward Allen, and he was part of Ozzy's Diary of a Madman and Speak of the Devil tours in America and the UK. So if you remember the Speak of the Devil album, he was featured in the gatefold artwork. Yes. I think he sat on Ozzy's lap, and
great place to be.
He was nicknamed Ronnie. Do you know that?
Well, presumably.
Yes.
Dig at Ronnie Dio and the size.
Correct. And every night he was hanged on stage to which song? Which song do you think he was hanged to?
Suicide Solution, it must be.
Well, you'd think that would be the obvious one. No, it was Goodbye to Romance.
That's a very weird one, isn't it? It should have been Suicide Solution. Get me, Sharon Osbourne.
But anyway, we laugh, but sad news at the same time.
Oh, no.
John Edward Allen sadly passed away in 1999. He was only 49. He was born in 1950. Young man. Aside from the Ozzy thing, he was in Blade Runner.
Really?
He was in lots of things. He was in Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
He will never top the Ozzy gig.
No, and sadly, going even a bit darker here, it was suicide from a drug overdose.
Ooh, that's not good. Oh, dear.
That's not
well,
good.
I think there's only one thing we can do, isn't there?
I think we should have a minute's silence. Now, a minute's silence on a podcast is probably not good for business.
But it's the least he deserves.
I think so. And I think wherever he is now, he would be more than happy to know that there are two silly old blokes in 2024 talking about him on a podcast about heavy metal.
Yeah, and I'm also sure that the single-digit listener will understand if there's a gap of 1 minute because it's a tribute to Ronnie.
Let's do it now. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. Right, that'll do.
I think that's enough, isn't it? So we're going to move on. Our topic of conversation up today is one that I'm sure is going to cause a whole load of controv. But my question to you, old friend, is do you think there comes a time when your favourite rock bands just have to fucking knock it on the head and say, it's done, it's over? Because we're getting into this era now, aren't we, where all of the bands that we grew up worshipping and idolising, they're all getting into their late 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s now. Kiss is a prime example. They decided they were going to call a halt to it, or at least so they say.
I was going to say, have they really?
Well, that's a big question. We'll wait to see. There are a lot of people who are now hanging up their strings, not their boots, but their strings, aren't they? So what's your view, Hunnsy? When is the time to go, thank you, good night, sayonara?
That's a massive question. There are so many bands who are still doing it and still making records that are good. If you're still making records that are good, why stop?
Okay, name me one classic metal band that you think is still making great music.
Judas Priest.
Okay.
Never ceases to amaze me, that band. God, I thought they'd run out of riffs and songs years ago. You know, they went through a period where they couldn't write for shit, but as long as they are producing music that tips its hat back to the old days, you still get that feeling that you got when you were listening to them back in the day. I think as long as they're doing that, off you go. Fill your boots. It's when they start releasing records that you just go, no, it doesn't work anymore. You are literally just going through the motions now. So I think that's when it's time to stop. There's always the moment when you go and see a band live and there's no energy.
Give me names, Hunnsy, give me names.
I saw recently a video on YouTube of a gig that Quo did in Mexico, and it was just like watching a band at a holiday camp. They opened with Down Down and it just went down from after that. It was just
it just went down from there.
Someone like Quo, it's high energy, isn't it? So when it gets to a point where it just feels slow, I think that's the time. Don't you?
There is something to be said for a little bit of self-awareness, isn't there? You were talking about Quo and that it just doesn't have any energy anymore. So do you remember when there were those viral clips that went round of Bon Jovi live?
Yeah, his vocals were shot, weren't they?
Oh man, it was just embarrassing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In many ways, it's a shame because I think fans would be understanding, wouldn't they? If John Bon Jovi just came out and went, look, Living on a Prayer was a really hard song to sing when you're 25 or whatever it is, because it's right up there, isn't it? Because you can't go living on a prayer. So, you know, hats off to him. That was a difficult song to sing, but he can't do it anymore. It's clear. So wouldn't the fans be forgiving if he just went, hey, guys, I'd love to do this, but I'm out of here. It's done. What fan could think he'd got his money's worth going to see Bon Jovi that night?
Yeah, but I did read that those particular performances, that was down to the fact that he did have a problem with his vocal cords, right?
Well, he certainly had a problem with his
vocal. Let's be nice. I'm trying to be nice here, right? He was suffering. Now, we know that the right thing to do is to cancel the gigs, right? And just be honest and say, if you're suffering from something and you can't give value for money and you can't perform the songs in the way that the fans deserve to hear them, just pull the gigs, pull the tour. Just do it. John Bon Jovi, at his peak, great frontman, great vocalist. If you've still got it, just get it fixed and come back. Don't succumb to the pressure of having to do it. Staying on the theme. What was your view about the fella that stepped into Steve Perry's shoes in Journey? There was a lot of criticism, right, of him. I don't know whether you've seen the film. There's a film, I think you can watch it on Netflix, of the whole story about how he joined the band, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name. Arnel
Pineda, and I know the story because he was in a kind of a Journey tribute band and then
had
the gig, didn't he?
You watch them with him. Journey are no spring chickens. That lad, you watch those performances, because he was younger, right? And he was jumping around and he was doing flips and blah, blah, because he's significantly younger. And he had the pipes, right? His energy transferred across to the band, and their performances, their live performances are like unbelievable. So sometimes bands just need to look at it and go, right, so what can we do to give us energy? What can we do to improve our show, you know? And sometimes just getting a younger member or a different type of person in the band could be the solution.
I think that's a reasonable point to make. But then the question arises, where does the line get drawn between authenticity and a tribute act? Because there's an argument that goes, yeah, great, they're now putting out an energetic live show and it sounds good and all the rest of it. Fine. My argument would be you're veering dangerously towards tribute act territory. And if people want to spend their money to go and see a tribute act, that's fine. But do you think Journey are charging tribute act prices? Because I don't think they are. You spend your money and you takes your choice, don't you? If people find that entertaining, good luck to them. I personally wouldn't put my hand in my pocket to go and see a band like that with replacement members who are no doubt better than the originals now. But it just doesn't feel very authentic to me. Now, maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon. I don't know.
I've seen plenty of comments from people, if you shut your eyes, it could be Steve Perry up there. And I'm like, well, just go home, shut your eyes and listen to Steve Perry then.
Exactly. Do you remember back in 2007 where there was all that big hoo-ha because Led Zeppelin were coming back together for Ahmet Ertegun's thing at the Royal Albert Hall? Was it the Royal Albert Hall, wasn't it?
No, I think it was at the O2, wasn't it?
Oh, the O2, wherever it was. And people were losing their shit over that, weren't they? And I was just not that bothered. Everybody was getting so excited about it, and I just wasn't that bothered because, in my view, it can never be as good as 1973. How could it possibly ever be as good as 1973? So I'd rather, the band's knocked it on the head. I kept my memories of what it was like seeing these groups in their pomp. And we just all go, okay, that's fine. That's a wrap.
Yeah, I get you. It's a good point.
AC/DC now can never be as good as when I saw them in 1979 at the Manchester Apollo with Bon Scott. Impossible. And I defy anybody to try and tell me differently. There's got to be a moment of self-awareness for these bands. And I know that there's a load of pressure because there's so much money in this. There's so much money to be made because people do go out and buy the concert tickets. Surely
there's an argument that it's a good thing if a generation much younger than us, could be our kids.
My kids hate heavy metal.
Yeah, no. Full enough, so does mine.
There you go.
But if by chance they did happen to like listening to that type of music and obviously are sick and tired of hearing parents go, I saw them back in the day, and there was a chance to go and see them, do the songs that you love. Admittedly, it may not be with the original lineup, but if the nucleus of the band is there and they play the songs that they recognise, that's a good thing, isn't it? Keeping the sort of rock music alive.
I think those kids should make their own history. And I'm an old fart, so it doesn't matter. We're making HoJo and Hunnsy's Hard Rock House for people of a certain age, and we can be as miserable and grumpy about that as we like. So I'm not for turning. I think there should be a statute of limitations on bands, and I think there should be a committee somewhere that decides whether bands can still cut it. And if that committee decides that it's over, then it's over. Yep. You can be on the committee. You can tell me, because I'm not saying there isn't a band of guys in the 70s and 80s that can't still cut it, but there has to be some kind of arbiter, some kind of judge. Are we putting ourselves up for this gig, Hunnsy?
Yes, definitely.
We're going to be the arbiters of whether bands should be allowed to continue.
Definitely. But just finishing on that theme, I went to see the Rolling Stones at Hyde Park, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the Stones many times, and I went because it's the Stones. Mick Jagger, I think he just turned 80. Don't know what he's on, but he was running around like a 25. I doubt it. Like a 25.
I doubt it too.
It was remarkable. Ronnie, Keith and Mick are still there. Keith shuffles around. Ronnie sort of shuffles around. Jagger, literally, he's like a jack in the... You just wound him up and he was off. It was incredible.
I'm not saying that this is a blanket judgment, but what we really hope is that people who patently aren't what they were should have the good grace to knock it on their head. So if the single-digit listener wants to get in touch with us, how can he go about it?
Several ways, really. They can go on Instagram, which is HoJo_and_Hunnsy. Probably not the one they want to go to because they won't remember what that is. A lot of underscores. They can go to Twitter, which is just HoJo and Hunnsy. They can go to our Facebook page, which is just HoJo and Hunnsy's Hard Rock House. You can send us messages on that as well and comment on everything. That is a growing fan base. Or you can just send us an email to hojoandhunsy@gmail.com and we will pick that up and reply when we can.
Marvellous. And also, as I like to say, if anybody likes our podcast out there, please just tell one other person who you think is a Gumby like
like yourself and like us, who would enjoy the kind of nonsense we talk about. And that way we shall grow our audience one Gumby at a time.
That's a good T-shirt. I like that.
We've waffled on enough for one day. Mate, it was lovely catching up, and I'll be seeing you here, same time, same place next week.
Yep, see you later, mate.
See you, dude. Bye.
Bye.